Hi everyone, it's Ren here. Welcome to my room, guys. And today we're going to be talking about the dumb things that people say about INFJs. I've selected 3 things. 1 negative, 2 positive, at least in substance. And we're going to see why it's dumb and why we should move beyond it. And I suggest we start now. Don't forget that you can get my book on the INFJ, The Ecstatic Soul, available at all the Amazon links below. You can check the description and the reviews, and same for The Infinite Castle, my new novel. So very nice product. If you're into Dostoevsky, Kafka, Murakami, and into INFJ existential angst, you might like it too. So number one dumb thing that people say about INFJs, that is a negative thing, is like INFJs think they're special snowflakes, and in fact they are INFJ because they deliberately rigged the test so that they could get that score or that type, because they want to be the rarest. So number one, something to keep in mind is that there's resources and articles that have been published in the last couple of years that suggest that INFJs may not be the rarest type anymore, that the rarest type now is ENTJ. Now, I had made a video about this back then, and my suggestion was, well, maybe there is an element of people will gravitate towards whichever is the rarest type, and so that will inflate the numbers. So ENTJ is currently that type, maybe next time will be ENFJ. However, the reason why it's dumb to say that is the fact that even if it's true that some people type as INFJs because they think that it's kind of special to be INFJ, that doesn't say anything about real INFJs who identify as INFJs and who very often or usually just, don't particularly enjoy being INFJ. They think it's hard, and they think that they possess a combination of qualities that doesn't seem really adapted to the modern world. So, the idea of being a special snowflake, of having this kind of vanity satisfied, is very short-lived compared to the much bigger enterprise of living a happy life, and that very quickly takes the priority. Now, the next dumb thing that people say about INFJ is supposedly positive, and there are videos about this made to inflate the egos of people who identify as INFJs to get views, is the idea that INFJs see through people like nobody does. I don't think there's honestly any particular evidence that INFJs see through people better than ENTJs say, or ENFJs or whatever. Like there's a lot of types that you could say have the quality of being good people readers. However, even this is kind of a rough kind of way of putting it, because there's lots of different ways of seeing through people. INFPs are very good at seeing through certain qualities of people, whereas like ENFJs would be good at seeing other things in people. So ENFJs would be good at probably noticing like people's motivations, seeing through people's motivations. But it's possible that INFPs are good at seeing through people in terms of their deeply held values, for instance, because they have a higher sensitivity to that kind of thing. It's linked to that. And INFJs, they probably sit in the middle. They're quite good at seeing people's motivations. They're also good at noticing kind of what values animate people, but they're probably neither the best in one or the other. They're just really good at kind of combining and being kind of complete in how they do that. But also noticing something else is that there is something about INFJs that will tend to sometimes counteract their ability to see through people. Is that, say, like if you see through someone, but what you see is something that's not so positive. Maybe the people that you're looking at have particular ambitions or schemes that are detrimental to other people or something like that. INFJs, because of FE and because they relate to moral frameworks externally, like made this video yesterday that talked about this, they will often be tempted to sort of forget about the science in the name of this moral ideal that tends to see people through the best version of themselves. And so to ignore the evidence and to continue giving people a chance, even if there's already been evidence that these people should not be trusted, for instance. And from this perspective, that could be described as a weakness of FE, and FI users probably be better at kind of saying, no, like, that's done, you know, enough evidence, I'm not interacting with this person anymore. Could be harder for INFJs. So, you know, that's something that I think is often said about INFJs, and something that I honestly have not seen a lot of evidence that it is true, you know. Of course, INFJs can be pretty good at seeing through people, but they're not exceptional in this regard. And lastly, another dumb thing that people say often about INFJs is that INFJs are altruistic, and that if someone identifies as an INFJ but is not particularly altruistic, then, oh, it must be evidence that they are, careful, an INFP or an INTJ or something like that. And it's like, again, it's dumb, because this is overlooking the fact that being genuinely and profoundly altruistic is a quality of very few people. A lot of people are either explicitly individualistic, or they can conceal their individualism and their vested interests underneath some superficial altruistic behavior. It is well known that altruism itself often has some egocentric motivations to feel good about oneself, for instance. In fact, there's a whole philosophy of ethics that takes this for granted. You know, it's called utilitarianism. And essentially utilitarianism says, yeah, that's a good thing. You know, since people like to feel good about being altruistic, let's exploit that, because, well, the net effect will be still more good in the world. So we can flatter their egos if the net result is positive in terms of the consequences. Then there's nothing wrong with that. So it's well known, you know. A lot of people like to feel good about themselves by having the image of someone who's altruistic. I remember not many years ago the very cringeworthy trend there was on Twitter, where people would describe themselves as like a do-gooder, you know, like a father. You know, like the typical descriptions. Father of 2 children, married, do-gooder, and then just they would say, oh, and I'm also the CEO of this company or whatever. So that really exists, and there's we always ought to keep in mind that the high FE types are always going to be at risk of displaying this kind of subtly ego-centered altruism. It's a risk. I'm not saying they all do, of course they don't, but that exists. And in fact, that's often one of the sources of conflict between FE and FI. You know, FI users not being necessarily impressed with this outward display of altruism on the part of some FE users. When they do, at least they demand to see more. They just want to check that, you know, this is coming from a real, genuine place and not a covert vanity place. And I think that INFJs are really just not safe from that. I think that you're going to have INFJs that are generally altruistic. Rare. You're going to have INFJs that are superficially altruistic, but really it's kind of to feel good about themselves. And then you can have INFJs who are kind of neither, you know, just like people like yourself and myself, probably altruistic some of the time, and sometimes focused on ourselves, and that's okay. And, you know, and NI leads tend to, you know, let's not forget that NI leads, if you combine INFJs and INTJs, they're the rarest kind of category. You know, they're much rarer than TI leads or NE leads or anything like that. So they tend to retreat back on themselves, because it's hard for them to relate to people in a, you know, in a deep, intimate way. They use frameworks to kind of reach out and across to people, but it's not easy. So there's a tendency to be detached in the first place that they always are struggling against. So in a sense, when they do manage to get to this kind of outward altruism, you know, that happens, it's because they already made a lot of effort on themselves. It's not easy. So that's another dumb thing that people say, and I think, and I thought that it ought to be corrected. Don't forget, you can support me on Patreon. I've had new supporters recently. Thank you so much for your support. It means a lot, helps the channel. I need help. I need resources, and hopefully continue producing good content for you guys every weekend. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye, guys.